Hello and welcome to this new version of YAG, that's version 0.14.1. There is no new content here. Everything you'll see in this video has been in YAG for quite long. So it's merely a technical evolution, but it brings four very nice new features. The first is almost a detail. We can now smooth the camera rotation using a new option in the player window here. This option sets how fast the camera rotation will follow the mouse. So if we set a very high value, we'll get a very nervous camera, as you can see. Okay, and that's basically the previous behavior in YAG. But now we can set a lower value to soften that motion. And I'm going to put an extremely low value. With such a low value, it's unusable, but it's just to show you that now I can shake the mouse and still get a smooth motion. Okay. The default value is about 5 or 10, I think, 5, right? And it's a compromise to get both a responding and smooth camera motion. All right. Next is a very useful one. We can now force the cursor to snap to the grid. So it's all done in the world setting window here, which by the way gets a new icon as you can see. So as a reminder, it was always possible in YAG to show a square or hexagonal grid and to choose its size. The novelty here is that new box with that magnet icon, and when checked, the mouse will snap to the center of the grid patterns. So it can be very useful for war games if you want to move your pawns only on specific places, or when building a map if you want to align objects or to create an army, etc., etc. Next is a visual feature. We can now enable some depth of field in YAG. So it's managed in the player visual settings here in this camera panel. So the first thing to do is to enable or disable the effect. So we're going to enable it here. And you can see that there is not much difference currently, and that's because the default setup is very neutral and basically sets no depth of field so that you can come back to a clear screen if you need it in one click using this button. Okay, so apart from that, we've got three different presets, and I'm going to talk about them in a few moments, and we've got 5 options here, and I'm going to present them right now. So we are going to start with a preset, so we've got something to see. So the first option here is the most important, and it's the aperture, exactly as in real life photography. So basically it sets the depth in depth of field. So the larger the number, the deepest the sharp zone. So you can see if I put a 32 here, I've got a very large sharp zone. And if I put a very small number opening my diaphragm, then I get a much more spectacular effect, much more narrow sharp zone here. Next one is the focus distance. It's the distance from the camera that will be of the zone that will be sharp. So it's expressed in meters or in the unit you have chosen. So basically, if I put a 2 here, then everything 2 meters away from the camera will be on focus. Okay, and if I put a 5, then everything 5 meters away from the camera will be on focus. Okay. Now this option is an autofocus, and basically it will set the focus on the center of the screen. So if I center the screen on the human character, you can see here that it is sharp and the rest is blurred. And if I move away from here and put the spider at the center, then the scene is clear on the spider. All right. Next here is the distance from the camera expressed this time in kilometers, at which the blur effect will reach 50% of its maximum. So you can think of it intuitively at the distance at which the blur will start. So if I put 1 kilometer, you can see that the blur effect starts a bit further away. And if I put 100 meters like so, then the blur effect is closer. And the last one is the maximum strength of the blur effect. So if I set it to 0, I basically remove any blur. And if I set it to a very strong value, I will blur completely my screen. And you can see now that if you are lost in those options, it can be very useful to have this default option to get back to it. So the three presets here are very simple. The first one is called macro photography, and it's a very spectacular effect, okay, with a very short depth of field, so you can use it for extreme close-ups, okay, and to get a spectacular and beautiful view. Um, the next one can be used at the scale of a human, a few meters. So then we've got a depth of field a few meters wide. And the last one, landscape, can be used at a larger scale, for larger scenes. Okay. So just for the pleasure of the eyes, let me show you the kind of result we can obtain when we mix ray tracing with depth of field using realistic models. So let's come back to that preset here, the macro preset, and you can see the scene is completely ray traced here. You will see that in an instant, and you can see that we get some pretty amazing result. Okay, we can focus on the ladybug here and come back to the grasshopper. So that's really something amazing. Okay, finally, the last option, the last new feature is one of those experimental edgy tech. So we can now enable DLSS in YAG. So of course it's done in the setting window. Here, this is a new option. So DLSS stands for Deep Learning Super Sampling, and it's an NVIDIA technology that basically reduces the number of pixels computed and interpolates the other using a trained AI. Because it computes much less pixels, it can drastically improve your performance. And I'm not talking 2 or 3% here. I'm talking 30 or 40%, and sometimes doubling or tripling depending on the picture. So that's really huge. That's really amazing. I mean, it's mind-blowing. So as every young tech, it comes with a few drawbacks though. First, you need an RTX capable graphics card, exactly like in ray tracing, so it's not currently available for everyone. And second, I discovered while testing that it breaks the depth of field, so use it only if you don't need about DOF. Okay, so just to show you, I'll go full ray tracing here. So basically in this option, you've got off, and then you can choose between quality and performance. Okay, so at the moment I'm going to let it off and I'm going full ray tracing and displaying my FPS, and you can see that when I apply, my FPS drops to about 15, 16 frame per second. Okay, now look what happens when I enable the performance option in DLSS here. So I want you to pay attention to two things. First, you will see that the the depth of field, sorry, will disappear. That's a bug, of course, but at the moment it's the way it works. And second, look at what happens to the FPS. So right, no DOF here, but look at the FPS. We are up to almost 40. Okay, so we went from 15 to 40 FPS. That's really, I mean, it's mind-blowing. It's amazing. And of course, if I come back to the optimized version of ray tracing, then I can have an image fully ray traced and running at the maximum 60 frames per second that I have set here in the FPS cap. Okay, so that's really amazing. That's really amazing. And without that, I fall back to 30 FPS, but I get my DOF back, so for the moment I'm going to keep it. All right, I think this is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching it. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if it's the case, then see you in the next one with pleasure. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.